Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. Today I wanted to try and build some stuff out of the resin block because I've seen it around so much and I really love the colour. It's so bright and orange and it looks super cool, and I've been wanting to play around with it for ages, so today is the day. Now when I first saw this lovely resin block, I was like, the orange is so cool, and when I saw the clump I was like, this looks like glitter. And then today I was kind of pondering on what would work well with this block, and I came across Skulk. Because to me, that just looks super cool. The contrast, mainly the contrast. I can't really think of anything else I really like about it, but the colors look really cool together. And so I wanted to use that as my inspiration, just this block color coordination. Now I didn't really have anything else in mind, so without further ado, let's go straight into the time lapse and I can tell you a little bit about what I built at the end. Let's go! So here is our final build. Now, I do love this build. The background really fits, and I think it looks super cool. I tried with some forced shadowing and lighting type stuff with this build, which was super fun because of the orange. I was able to use some weird blocks, you know, like the nether gold ore, shroom lights, and magma blocks. Really strange, but it was super fun. And I did enjoy just using a bunch of weird blocks that I don't often get to use. I'm so happy I was able to experiment with this resin, and this looks super cool. So let's explain a little bit about the whole build. So the first thing that I built was this tower, and I did kind of duplicate it over here, but I did remove some of the lines just because I wanted it to spread out a little bit more, and it worked pretty well. The time-lapse was a bit janky because it took me ages to try and figure out what I wanted to do, because I built this tower at the start and I loved it. I thought it was super cool, but I didn't know where I wanted to go from there. So there was a lot of things that I had to try, and then I deleted, and then I kept trying and kept deleting, so it took me a very long time. But I loved the foreshadowing that I was able to do, and once I started doing that, I kind of figured out the direction I wanted to go with the build, which was to focus on a lot of the colouring force lighting stuff, and also just make some really cool patterns without making too much depth. So yeah, the first thing I did was this tower, duplicated a couple places just to give it a bit of a castle-y, fortressy vibe, and right at the end is when I decided to do all of the colouring. The very last thing that I decided to do on the build was these pops of light, because when I think of resin, I think plasticky, so I wanted it to be very shiny and reflective, or give that appearance. And that's why we've got the little bits of end stone, which pop out really nicely with the resin. And it's also another weird block I was able to use. So some of the blocks that I don't get to use often, of course, are the end stone and the shroom lights and magma blocks, nether gold ore. But this build kind of helped me encompass all of them, which was very fun. When I was doing the lighting, one of the issues I had is I didn't want it to make it look too messy, and I had to decide where I wanted the light to be coming from, which I've decided was about here, so it was beaming down that way, which is why we've got the lightest parts at the top and over here. And then afterwards I did realise when I did this lovely background, which we'll talk about in a second, maybe it doesn't make too much sense with the moon being behind, but you know, it still looks cool, so I'm gonna keep with that. I love the little details we've got here with the end rods because it just makes it sparkle. And again, I think I said it in the intro, one of my favourite parts of the resin was it looked very glittery. And that's one of the reasons I got the Skulk. Skulk also looks glittery, so does the nether gold ore. And then we've got little bright patches with the end rods, which give that very sparkly effect, which I think looks super cool. Now I did these pointy bits, which really helped. And originally I just did it like this. So the resin brick, the mangrove fence, and the end rod, which looks super cool, but it was just kind of plain until I did some of the lighting. And as you can see, we changed the mangrove wood here to the pale wood, which also looks super cool. And again, I haven't really been able to experiment with much just yet, but so far it's proved pretty helpful. Now let's take a closer look at some of the force lighting we have here. So this whole back section is very force lighting. Oh no, there's nothing in here. Oops. Sorry. I didn't get any of the interior stuff done. As you can see with the background, it's kind of meant to be viewed just from the front here. But I did put a bunch of shadowing stuff here because when I looked at it originally with just the resin at the back, it blended in a little bit too much and it didn't give that depth that I was really looking for. And that's why we've used a bunch of the chiseled resin bricks, which are just slightly darker than the normal resin, and then a lot of the magma, because from afar it does just blend in to be darker. You don't really notice the texture, which is super cool. And of course our little gradient with the mangrove wood, the gold ore, and then the magma block, which has worked really well for this whole build. And it was, yeah, mainly used over here where the crevices kind of are, so you can see where the shading would be. Now I could have done most of this just with the magma block, but because this build is focused around the resin, I didn't want to cover up too much of it because it's kind of the most important staple part of this build. One of the other cool details, we've got the Sculpt Catalyst, which is another weird block that we got to use, and that was just to bring in some of the lighter parts and give it a little bit more of a detail, and I think it looks super cool because it's got that same, I don't know, like pointy swirly pattern, you know, it goes in like a U shape, which is what we've got up here. and it translates it down here just in a smaller form, which I really like. I had a friend jump on near the end, which you might have seen in the time lapse, and they just came on to help me decide what looked too messy and what I didn't like about the build, which did help me. Even if they didn't realize it, it did help me just having another person look at it and then trying to look at it from an outsider's point of view. I was able to figure out which parts looked a bit messy and I was able to fix that myself. So whenever you're building, I highly recommend just getting a second opinion, someone to come have a look at it. Even if they don't know exactly what the issue is, just you explaining to them what you think the issue is kind of helps explain it to yourself. Now let's go to the background, because this was a last minute addition that I wanted, and it does help pull the build together. We've got this really cool moon and cloud design, which I saw just a few pictures online with that same color scheme and idea, and I thought it would fit really well because we've got this big moon which helps balance out this top tower just a little bit with the smaller section here, as well as all of the higher clouds, and the way that they're set out looks really cool. These weren't super hard to do, they were very easy, and I just did basically the brush tool with World Edit and did some shading with the clouds after I decided how I wanted them to look, which I didn't really measure them out, I just did it by ear. I was like, we'll see what happens. And then I cleaned them up individually at the end. And again, this didn't take me a long time, but I'm happy that I added it because it really brings a whole nother level to the build. It's kind of one of my favorite things I've been doing at the moment, is just adding backgrounds to all of my builds, and I hope that you like it as well. But yeah, that's about all we have for the build. We'll do a little sneaky back check, which wasn't really done. But yeah, it's kind of got the shading from inside, which is something. How much it's worth is based on personal opinion. But yeah, I hope that you liked this build and you liked the video. That's about all I've done with the build. I don't think there's really anything else I can show you with this. The time-lapse I hope was interesting for you to see my building process, because this build was hard for me to grasp and figure out how I wanted it to look in the end. So I made sure to keep that whole process in. I didn't cut out any bits that were a little all over the place. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed the video. I'm sorry it's a little bit late on uploads, but I've got another video that I've been working on that's taking me a lot longer than I expected to edit. But in the meantime, I hope you enjoyed this build and video, so thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Goodbye!